Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank each and every one of you for coming today. Hope you had a pleasant holiday. I apologize for bringing you out on the holiday weekend for a meeting. Let me say this. The agenda for the day is improperly before us. Based on section 3.21, section 3.22, and section 3.30. However, it is not an attempt to get around anything. The item that's on this agenda today, based on this chart, will be heard at the next regular meeting of this city council. I don't have to be right. They don't have to be wrong. They can be right. I can be wrong. But the charter says we will find out at the next regular meeting of this city council. Based on that, I will not call this meeting to order. However, if you read the charter, I will be in this building. I'm not disabled, and I'm not mentally ill. I will be in this building present, but I shall not call this meeting to order. Thank you all so much.
I'd like to make a motion, since we have a quorum of council present, to call this meeting.
Read the charter.
Can I get a ruling on that, City Attorney, Madam Attorney?
So it sounded like the mayor said that, it sounded like he said that the process for veto under your code, under your charter, requires the item to go on the next regular meeting. And I think that's what he was saying. That's what I'm gonna, without him being here to clarify, I'm assuming that's what I understood him to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that he left before we had a discussion about it, but.
So here's the issue before the council is whether the mayor has taken action to sufficiently activate the veto process. Under your charter, the mayor can veto in two manners. He can veto an ordinance, no matter what's on the ordinance. He can veto a resolution, but not the entire resolution, just a portion that deals with budget item appropriation. So the question before the council today is, has the mayor exercised the power of veto in a lawful manner to where that process can move forward on the regular agenda? That's a question that the council needs to decide. As far as legally, there is nothing in the charter. I think you have two things that have been vetoed here. You have there's a dispute between the selection of the hearing officer. That provision of a resolution has been vetoed. You also have my agreement, the city attorney contract that's been vetoed. So those are the two things. In my opinion, if you look at the first one, in my opinion, the dispute between who the hearing officer may be, it is not my opinion that a court would reasonably believe that that is a budget appropriation, that is a budget item, that is a line item in your budget. And for that reason, it wouldn't fall within the budget procedure to go through the veto process. So it's an unauthorized use of the veto process. With respect to my contract, there's absolutely nothing in the charter that gives the mayor the ability to veto any agreement that the council as a quorum collectively approves, regardless of whose contract it is. So I think the question came to me in calling this meeting is, do we have to go through the veto process through two documents that we know facially from the wording of the charter are not authorized to be part of that process? And I think that's the question before you today.
So I would just like to ask this clarifying question for the public and the people that are watching at home. When the mayor issues a veto, the vote to override that veto cannot be taken until the next regular meeting. Our next regular meeting would be January 14th. However, if the veto itself is invalid, then the process for overriding the veto is unnecessary. We need take no vote to override a veto if the veto itself is not valid. And you are opining, as the attorney for the city, that neither of these vetoes are valid.
Exactly.
It is my opinion that there is no authority under the charter to veto either of the two items that have been vetoed. That is my opinion. With respect to it going on the next agenda, I'll read to you the portion of the charter. That is actually limited to ordinances. It says, an ordinance vetoed by the mayor shall automatically be on the agenda at the next regular meeting of the city council for reconsideration. And we're not dealing with an ordinance for either of these two items.
There's a resolution and a contract.
Right.
Correct.
And so if the veto is invalid, do we even need to take a vote to override?
So technically you don't if it's an invalid veto, but I think it would be maybe incumbent on the council, or not incumbent, but it may be the best practice for you guys to discuss and see that you mutually agree that it is something that you perceive to be outside the authority for veto. Because two of you may feel that way, and you might have five who don't agree.
And so I have one more question, because, you know, all of these special meetings, everything that we've been doing this month has been about an overreach of authority. You're saying that the mayor can only veto a budget appropriation and an ordinance. But in the past, the mayor has vetoed several resolutions. He vetoed our name change, which was a resolution, and then a vote of council. He vetoed our seal. Are any of those valid vetoes? I'm just asking. Are any of those vetoes valid?
So I was not the city attorney at that point. I have not looked at that documentation. I need to look further into it.
But if they're not budget appropriations or ordinances, they would not be a valid veto, is that
If it's
correct?
not an item of appropriation or an ordinance, it wouldn't be a valid veto.
Thank you.
Here's a question. My question is relative to, and I've been trying to get an answer, the expenditures for this, including, can you tell me what line item? And this may be a CFO question. So, because these legal expenses, are they coming from our regular, are they coming from your allocation? Or is this additional legal expenditures?
No, so the city attorney contract is actually identical to what you guys have done through the budget process, and it's the amounts that you have been paying me to date. We have just memorialized it on a document. So you guys have already allocated these funds. You've allocated an X amount to litigation, to the contingency for that purpose. You've allocated a X amount to the general service, but we have not had a document that formally describes what those allocations were.
I'm clear, but we specifically talk about litigation in this agreement coming from the contingency fund. And the contingency fund is for any kind of emergency or anything that we can encounter for the, deal with the city. So I'm specifically asking about these additional legal expenses we incurred in this process. Do they come from your contract, or is this an additional expense? That's what I'm trying to understand.
So my understanding through the budget process, and Mr. Malazzi can correct me if I'm incorrect, but every amount that you have allocated for litigation, you have put into the contingency. That's my understanding. So that means that unless if the council no longer has the expectation to use the contingency for litigation, that means that you won't have funding for it, because you did not allocate any litigation funding to the legal services budget. Is that correct?
Let me speak. I'm asking the CFO or the attorney to answer that question before we go on. I'm not finished. Can somebody answer that for me?
So we have two within legal. We have two amounts. We have 500,000, and then we have 100 that is for litigation. Anything that is to do with litigation, it is only 100. However, you knew that you will need more than $100,000, so you appropriated another amount during the last meeting that you moved from contingency to get into litigation.
When did we do that at the last meeting?
You just did last meeting about $1 million that you did.
So,
Okay, and I didn't realize it had already been moved over, so I thought it was still in contingency. I didn't realize, it sounds like he's saying that it's already been moved over.
You passed the resolution to make the move. Whether it has moved, but you have already appropriated it.
but this okay, I know we created a contingency fund, but that's for all issues with the city, right? Or are you saying it's a separate legal line for contingency?
At the end of the 2020 budget,
Right,
you had the
we build the.
$2.6 million
Right,
put aside. $1.5 million was for directly to fund balance, to
Right.
reduce our fund balance. $1.1 million was allocated for contingency. Contingency, that's for everything.
right.
But the last meeting, you specifically said 1 million should be for litigation.
All right, Councilwoman Gillies.
I haven't yielded. So again,
She can't talk forever.
Well, I mean, we got this. Go ahead, Councilwoman Rob.
so again, the $1 million in litigation is for that, it can go, item B litigation can go towards that line. So there is a financial implication. That's like a blank
Actually,
paycheck.
during the budget, you almost put it into litigation, into legal. However, you left it in the contingency, but this time you specifically said, let's move this 1 million into legal. So you put it in the legal side of it.
Councilwoman Brown, are you clear?
Yeah, I just want everybody to be clear that we're talking about there's $1 million in addition to, which is more than what we budgeted for legal. Because what you said is we have 500,000, we have 100,000, and then we have 100 for litigation, for contingency. But I thought contingency was everything that we can encounter as a city. That was one of the things the public kept asking us about. Make sure we have money in the event of any emergency that could arise.
Let me be clear, let me talk, please.
So you're saying that we put $1 million in legal?
During the last meeting, you voted specifically to have $1 million from contingency for legal.
So now the total budget is 1.6 million for legal. Is that correct?
For legal, that's correct, 1.6 for legal. If you put the whole of this, but this 1 million was specifically for legal that you needed, if you remember, was specifically, you had specifics.
Yeah.
You
And
have
if I can
specifics.
clarify too, the litigation component is not earned. I only earn the litigation component as you elect to litigate. So if we have no litigation, then that amount won't be spent and it can be transferred for other purposes. If you have, moderate litigation, so it's gonna depend on how actively you guys litigate or how often you're sued. You're sued quite frequently. We get anti-litem notices, several a week where people trip over the sidewalk. They say that someone didn't maintain their yards properly and it's the city's fault for not coming in and doing whatever. I mean, you guys get sued by people literally every week for every kind of purpose you can imagine. They get anti-litem, we notify the insurance company. So you're going to have that component, and then you're also going to have the component as far as protecting the citizens' rights. You're a new city, you've transitioned, you have properties that you feel that your constituents are entitled to, so you're going to have litigation of that nature. So the amount that we use for litigation is going to be completely dependent on the council as to what you elect to pursue legally.
And then my last question, is it customary that you would draw a legal agreement, a legal agreement that's pertaining to you, is it advised that you wouldn't have an independent person review this? Like, you created the agreement that we're approving.
So we've had 3 lawyers who've done that. Your chief judge has done that.
But you reviewed it before we again.
Well, yeah, so I reviewed it,
Right.
but I did put a provision in here. You guys, if you want to get outside counsel to review it, I actually put language in there saying that that's your prerogative and discretion to do that. I mean, it may not hurt, if you feel that you would like to have that input, I would definitely advise you to have someone look into it, because that is your discretion to do that. You're not required to. If you feel that you understand the agreement, that you're willing to enter into it, then you don't have to, but I did put language in there just letting you know that if it makes you comfortable, then that is a recommendation that you would get outside counsel to also look at the agreement.
Well, I think that should be standard at any point, that we would have a legal review of any document. Because even though in those instances they brought forth, you even made changes to those documents, even though they were prepared by lawyers, correct?
Yes, correct, that's
So
correct.
I think that's proof, that's good business. That's good business, and particularly, and I've said it, and I'm gonna say it again, I am concerned that the standard to deal with anything with the lawyer is higher than we have for the city manager or any other position in the charter. Oh, don't try to cut me off now.
No, Dr. Rod, your time, we've given you your
whatever.
time, it's on here, that's fine.
No, I still
I
have
just-
time.
Councilwoman
That's fine.
Gillian, you
I
have the
just
floor.
want to
I know
make
y'all
it
do
very
what y'all wanna
clear,
do.
I want to make it
You
very clear to the public about the budget process. Some of you were here during the budget process. Towards the end of the budget process, I asked, and I was reminded by one of my council people to do it. I asked that $1 million be set aside in the contingency for the attorney for litigation. The only money in the line item for her budget is for what she does routinely. So what is she supposed to do when we have all these cases coming up? There is no money in the litigation line for it. Money need to be put in there for it. And I said, 1 million. Some of you, I know, remember that. Not only that, recently, we all voted for that 1 million to be moved from contingency to the attorney's line. Even though we knew that it was already appropriated. Wasn't no new appropriation. Moving money from one line to the other is not an appropriation after it's already been approved. So I just want to make it real clear that nobody is doing anything that they should not have done with that $1 million, okay? And so, that's it. I know the money was moved. I wanted to make sure that we had enough money in the litigation line and she not be using money that she's supposed to be using for her everyday attorney functions. Litigation is in addition to. You're going to court, that's going to take more money, that's going to take more time, whatever. And we got all kinds of litigation that we know is coming up. We know it. In addition to some of the things that she talked about that just happens on a daily basis, okay? We got litigation that we need to do.
Well, I also put in the agreement that the council at any time can change the compensation. So that's part of the agreement, that you have full authority to change it. And if you change it and I don't like it, then I have the option to resign.
Right.
Are you clear?
I'm clear. I'm real clear.
Councilman Khalid?
So, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I remember, I don't want to go over our whole budget again, but I remember there was $1.8 million because at the time, I think we were suing Fulton County for Wolf Creek, and we were contemplating some other lawsuits. So, that's neither here nor there. You put in the contract that we could have it reviewed by an outside party. We had that option, and a majority of council voted not to do that. There was another contract for T. Dallas Smith to be our commercial realtor, and I don't remember 3 bids, I just remember them coming, and I wanted more time to review that contract, and I was outvoted. One of the reasons that we're here is because when people get outvoted, they won't let it be the end. right? When this majority of the body makes a decision, that's the decision. And we all have to abide by it. We all have to support and defend it as our oath in the charter. And that's what happens when people make decisions. I do want to move on. I will say this though about the legal expenses for this particular case. It was supposed to be over December 10th. It was supposed to be over 2 weeks ago. But some folks decided to drag it out. So of that $1 million, just know that every time we drag this hearing date out to another date, or people file a motion to not do something, we were supposed to have this meeting yesterday. So every day this gets dragged out, we're spending the city's money. The city's money is being spent. But you have opined, Madam Attorney, that the mayor does not have the authority to initiate a veto for a contract. So I'm going to make a motion now that we void the mayor's illegitimate veto of your contract on the grounds that it is not lawful or within the means of the charter.
One technicality, we have not officially opened the business.
Okay, so, you wanna hold that?
Yeah, I'll hold that.
Mr. Clerk?
Meeting's been called to order?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Meeting's called to order at 2:52. Roll call. Honorable Mayor William Bill Edwards. The Honorable Councilmember Mark Baker.
Present.
The Honorable Councilmember Catherine Robb.
Present.
The Honorable Councilmember Carmelita Gomes.
President.
The Honorable Councilmember Helen Willis. The Honorable Councilmember Naima Gilliard.
Here.
The Honorable Councilmember Rosie Jackson.
Present.
And the Honorable Councilmember Khalid.
Present.
Mr. Chairman Pro Tem, you have a quorum.
Thank you. You call the first item.
First item on the agenda is discussion regarding the mayor's veto of the hearing officer section of resolution 2019-060.
Since we heard some of that anyway, we'll still just for formality allow you to speak before we go forward.
So I think we've hired Mrozek to represent. I don't want to say anything that's inconsistent with what, if you want to.
The issue of the veto of the hearing officer involves an excessive use of the veto power by the mayor. It's not effective. The hearing officer issue, I gave you a memo on Monday. And in that memo, I explained to you in detail what the legal requirements are for the hearing on Monday. There is absolutely no legal requirement for a hearing officer. None. Attorney Waynes, representing Ms. Willis, refused to cooperate in designating a hearing officer. Mayor Edwards has vetoed the selection of a hearing officer. It appears no one wants a hearing officer, so we won't have one on Monday. So the veto, it seems to me, is not only legally ineffective, but unnecessary.
So wait. Can you stand back up? Anybody? Councilwoman Rowdy, Councilman Khalid.
So, is it, and I think you had suggested that in that event, the mayor would preside over the hearing? Or for the benefit of the public?
For the benefit of the public, consistent with my legal opinion on Monday, the council will be the jury and the council will be the hearing officer. This is very common. This is Georgia law. If a teacher is being removed, for example, the teacher has rights before he or she can be removed. And he or she is entitled to an administrative hearing. There's no requirement that there be a hearing officer. There's no requirement that the Georgia rules of evidence apply. Therefore, on Monday, this council will handle the removal hearing just as it handles every council meeting. Now, the fact that Mayor Edwards is one of the two council members whose removal, disqualification, or other relief is sought against, the council may choose to allow Mayor Edwards to retain the chair Mayor Edwards may recuse himself or step down from the chair, as he's done today. Or 3, the council can remove him from the chair for purposes of this hearing. Those are choices that the council has.
Councilman Brown, you good?
Okay. I'm good.
Councilman Khalid?
Is that a decision that we need to make today, or can we?
No, on Monday.
Thank you.
Consistent with my memo on Monday, those hearing procedures that I've recommended comply with Georgia law, comply with the U.S. 14th Amendment constitutional due process rights, and are fair exercises of the removal power found under your charter.
So is there any action that needs to be taken based on your legal opinion of this body right now? Is there any legal action that needs to take place?
Regarding the resolution.
Which resolution is referring to?
Regarding the veto of the hearing
Right.
officer, do we need to take a vote on something?
In my view, there's no need to take a vote.
Okay.
If he doesn't want it, we won't have it. It's all right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clerk?
So you're gonna withdraw the motion, so that's been withdrawn?
Well, no,
It was
we
up.
never made it in formal setting of a meeting, and I think it's the next item anyway.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, discussion regarding the mayor's veto of agreement 2019-032, professional services agreement for city attorney.
Now, this we had a conversation for. Do you want to reiterate?
Yeah.
No, not you.
Okay.
The city attorney. For the sake of.
I don't have any comment. If you have questions, I can field
Okay.
questions.
Councilman Khalid, then Councilman Rock.
I move that we void the mayor's attempted veto of the city on the grounds that it is unlawful and non-compliant with our city charter.
City attorney?
You said the city.
The veto of the city attorney, I'm sorry.
Oh, second.
Probably moving second in discussion. Councilman Rock.
Well, again, I just want to say that I think we were at a place that we, with the exception of that one provision, that we supported moving forward on the agreement. I still think, though, any legal agreement should be reviewed by an outside attorney. And I'm gonna go on record in saying that.
She already did twice.
So,
Could you be disrespectful, Councilmama Gilliard? I
Okay.
didn't interrupt you when you were talking.
You yield, Councilman Rock?
Yes. That's all.
Councilman Khalid.
I do have a procedural question. So, to override a veto takes 5 votes. But we're not overriding a veto. We're just recognizing that the veto itself was invalid to begin with. So what is the test to void a veto that is invalid? Is it still 5 votes?
No, a majority of council can collectively come to a decision that you're not going to recognize the veto as compliant with the charter to initiate proceeding that veto through the normal process.
So I just want to be clear with the audience. This is not a vote to override a veto. This is just recognition that the veto was out of bounds to begin with.
That is my understanding of what you're doing, correct?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, second vote. All those in favor?
This is illegal.
Passes 5. You got it.
I make a motion that we close out the meeting. We have gone on the 2 items that were on the agenda.
I said.
Probably moving second in discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
I'm sorry, I do have one thing. I'm sorry. One point of discussion. May I have a point of privilege? One point of personal privilege. Many of you all have heard that the Reverend Albert Love passed this week. Yes, his funeral is going to be Friday, January 3rd at 10 a.m. at Wheat Street Baptist Church. And then he'll be interred at the cemetery off of Veterans Memorial. So it sounds like some people didn't know, but Friday, January 3rd, Wheat Street Baptist Church. Please join us for the homegoing of Reverend Albert Lowe. Thank you.
Thank you.